All right, we're live. We're live. Okay, cool. We made it. So hopefully you're on this page already. All you need to do is refresh this page so that this video comes up now at 3 o'clock. It is now go time. Looks like it's all happening. So it's all happening on my end. If it's not happening on your end, maybe let me know in the chat box. Otherwise, yeah, I'm just going to start. So welcome to this third installment of the Creative Freedom Forum. Basically a series of 4 hangouts that I'm doing to share some information with creatives about how to reach your full potential. And the way that I go about doing that is by helping creatives sort out their head garbage, what's going on between their 2 temples that keeps them from doing their creative work. So today the topic is going to be fear, how fear kills creativity, and if you let it. And also the other thing is how you can overcome that fear, how you can kind of manage that fear so that it doesn't kill your creativity, so that yeah, so that you feel comfortable, happy, open, willing to take risks. All of that sort of stuff comes from being a fearless artist, which I'll go on about a bit later on. So yeah, in this hangout, it's going to go for 20 to 30 minutes. I always say that, but it goes a bit longer. But I am going to try and keep this one to 20 or 30 minutes, which I also say every time. First of all, so I've given you a little bit of an idea of what this hangout's going to be about. But really, first up, I just want to welcome you and thank you for dropping by on this hangout. There's obviously something that's piqued your interest on this topic or the concept of creative mindset. So welcome. I want to acknowledge you for taking some time out of your day to hang out with me. I know that I view my time as being extremely precious, and if you do that as well, then I value your time. So I want to deliver as much as I can in the next 20 to 30 minutes to make it worth your while, so that you know, later tonight you don't feel like you got ripped off, that someone stole half an hour from you. I want to make this valuable for you. Okay, cool. So I'll very briefly tell you who I am and what I do. So my name's Mio. I'm a singer and a songwriter. I used to struggle a lot in my creative practice. I wouldn't practice consistently, and I was very frustrated. I always wanted to be better than I was, and that got quite annoying. So I decided to go spend a whole bunch of money that I didn't have at the time to learn how to really sort this stuff out, how to really accelerate my creative practice, so that I was just writing heaps more songs and practicing heaps and, you know, creating exciting visions and goals that I could work towards, and then just, you know, working towards them and smashing it. So I ended up doing that. I got really good at implementing all of this great stuff. And then I started teaching it to people, to friends, and they got heaps of value out of it. So I started sharing it with every other creative person I know. So that's really what I'm doing here. The aim of what I'm doing right now is to share this information that no one out there shares with creatives. For some reason, this is like this black hole, this it's like a dodgy part of town that no creative goes to. What I've done for you is I've gone to the dodgy part of town. I've learned all this stuff, and I've come out of the Bronx to bring this information back to people. And the reason I'm doing that is because it's helped me so much in my creative practice, and I want to share that with other people. So, okay, so that's that. Yeah. So I'm going to jump straight into it because I've got so much to share on this topic. So fear, how fear kills creativity. In the 2-day course that I run a 2-day workshop, which I'll explain more about at the end of this session, and also tomorrow I'm going to introduce an amazing offer if people want to come to do that 2-day workshop. Yes, I'm going to be releasing something extremely limited and very special for people that are on this Hangout series. And it's only going to be for a couple of people. So, and it's going to be extremely special and a little bit ridiculous and a little bit irresistible, especially if you're enjoying this content. But I'll talk more about that later and tomorrow. Yeah, so in the 2-day workshop, I spend a lot of time on fear because there's a lot of subconscious head garbage going on to do with fear that creatives are not very conscious of. So I can reel off a bunch of potential fears that you may or may not have. And you may have some of these or none of these or a few of these in combination. But and maybe you can think about yours and you can even write them down now, because I'm going to kind of ask you to do some writing later, because everything I do, I always have a practical element to this, because this, to me, it's not just theory, it's about taking action. Because if you're not taking action, you're pretty much not doing anything. This information is pretty much useless. So I want you to take a pen and paper and take as many notes as you can so that you're processing this stuff. Okay, so if you're on this chat and I would love you to share what your fears may be that you think might be holding you back. And as you're doing that, I can voice those as well. So there are many fears to choose from, really. So there's fear of making a mistake, fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of looking foolish, fear of what people think, fear of being different, fear of being an outsider, fear of letting go or losing control, fear of taking the first step, fear of success, fear of making lots of money and how that might change you, fear of making no money and being dirt poor, fear of turning into a drug addict, fear of having to have a chaotic life, fear of having to abandon your children and family to have a creative practice. So that, I mean, there are a couple of them, and I'm sure there's a list as long as my arm, to do with people's fears. So you may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 400 different fears. And so now I'm kind of going to explain a bit about where fear comes from, why we even have that experience, and how you can overcome it. Because once you start to dredge up all this subconscious fear that's happening and that behavior, once that comes into your awareness, you're able to change it and you're able to make conscious decisions about what you want your creative practice to be and what you want your life to be. So it's an extremely empowering concept, which is what I would love for you to get out of this. Okay, so there's a very simple line that explains fear to me. This is the way that I think about it. It really doesn't need to be any more complicated than this. Fear is the future anticipation of pain. So that pain can come in many different forms. It can be a type of psychological pain, or it can be a rejection, or it can be a physical fear of pain, future pain, right? So like maybe when you're sitting in the dentist's waiting room, you're starting to maybe feel a little bit fearful as to what's going to happen, because there might be a future anticipation of pain. Okay, so that's fear. And fear exists in your mind. It is created in your mind. It is not created by anything outside of you. There may be a situation where there's something outside of you that maybe stimulates that response, but that response happens in your mind. So that is created by you and your physiology. So I'll talk more about that a bit later, but please keep that in mind, because that is really important to remember, that fear is created in the mind. Okay, that's a hot tip. Write that one down. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit more about that physiology and where this fear response comes from and why we even have it. Okay, so there's a bit of neuroscience coming up here, but I'll keep this very brief. So there are two parts of the brain that deal very directly with fear. So many people have heard of the fight or flight response, right? So this is a part of the reptilian part of the brain. So it's really the earliest formation of the brain, which is the reptilian stem. It's right at the bottom. So they call it the reptilian brain because this is what reptiles have. So if you ever see a reptile, they ever only have 3 different responses in any situation. So they need to decide whether they're going to fight with something, whether they're going to flee, or whether they're going to mate with it, right? So there's only ever 3 decisions happening in a reptile's mind at any one time. It's the same thing for humans. So anything that comes in our senses, through our senses into our brain, runs through this part of the reptilian brain and it gets processed there first. So anything that comes through, it will influence whether we decide to do something or not do something. Another part of the brain is the amygdala. This is also a fear center of the brain. It processes fear. It does lots of other things, but it also processes fear. And this is where it is stimulated by it's stimulated by movement, and it's also stimulated by any risk of pain, right? So any type of pain, like I mentioned before, physical, emotional, psychological kind of pain. So the way that I like to describe this amygdala, because that's just a weird neuroscience term, I like to think of it as a sentry on a ship, right? So it's like the lookout on a ship up in the crow's nest, and it's up really high and it's on high alert all the time. It's like obsessive compulsive disorder when it comes to looking out for fear. So it sits up there and it looks out into the distance, and anything that is perceived to be a risk, a future risk, it can see really far ahead, and it'll say, oh, look out for that thing over there. You know, it's an iceberg. You don't want to go over there. But really it's just, you know, a seagull has landed in the water, and from far away it looks like something, right? So it's constantly overreacting to keep us safe. So that is really the primary function of this fear response and of the amygdala, is to keep us safe. So it used to be a very important function in the evolutionary process, because it would always constantly be on the lookout for signs of danger, right? But the way that things are now, we live in these cozy little houses. Our housing is secure. We have secure access to food and water and friendships and all these types of things, right? But we still have this ancient piece of hardware in our brain that has not really caught up with the times, and it is constantly overreacting, right? Okay, cool. So hopefully that gives you some idea of what fear is in the mind, where it comes from, the function in the brain of where it comes from, and its past uses. So its favorite phrase is "what if," right? So it's always has this question mark, like, what if this happens, and what if it turns out like this? What if they say this, and what if they react like this, and what if they throw tomatoes at me, and what if they don't like it, and what if I end up dirt poor, and what if I end up being kicked out of my house, or right? So it's constantly looking for these things, and it's one of the biggest limiting factors that holds creative people back from just taking the steps to move forward and do their creative work and put it out into the world. Okay, cool. So, all right, I think you've got a good enough understanding of where fear comes from. Now, I want to start to mess with your mind by reframing fear. So what most people call fear, I actually call them phobias. Because a phobia is slightly different to a fear. A phobia is an irrational fear that gives you compelling reasons not to do something. So it's an irrational fear, right? So there are legitimate fears. If there's a car streaming towards you and you're standing in the middle of the road, it's probably good to have a strong fear response that kicks in and says, move. But most, I would say 99.9999999% percentage of fears in your creative practice and in my creative practice, they're actually phobias. There is no danger. There is no danger involved, and especially no physical danger unless you're doing some really whacked out circus tricks or something like that. But I mean, someone who's just going to their studio to paint something, there should be zero fear associated with that activity. Okay, so now I'm going to reframe some phobias. I'm going to give you some statistics, and maybe I'm going to quickly jot these down for you. Okay, so I'm going to draw some really exciting pictures, right? Okay, so here you go. So I'm going to talk about a couple of different things really quickly here. Okay, so this is supposed to be a spider, right? So between the years 2000 and 2005, in that 5-year period, globally there were 8 deaths from spiders, right? Spider-related deaths. But they were not even from the spider venom. They were from some infection afterwards because these people couldn't get it treated or something like that, right? So that's 8 deaths in 5 years. Okay, the next one is this one. Okay, so that's supposed to be a shark. Okay, so in 2013, there were 4 deaths related to sharks, right? So shark-related deaths. Which is okay. So these are not nice. These are not nice numbers. But if you think about maybe your reaction, your fear response, perhaps to a spider. If there's even a spider in the room, maybe some people don't really have that fear or that phobia. But there are many people also who will not even step into an ocean because they are terrified of sharks. Okay. So next one here. All right, that's an automobile. Last year, 2014, there were 1.24 million deaths caused by automobile accidents. That is a lot, wouldn't you agree? Then there's this one. Last year, 2013, I'm getting these numbers from. So cigarette smoking related deaths, 5 million people a year. That's almost a Holocaust every single year, just those two things combined, right? So now I want you to quickly think about the response you might have if you were near a spider and a shark. What kind of that physiological response that happens, that impulse, very powerful, very strong. And then what's your physiological response to getting in a car or either smoking or seeing someone that is smoking? Like if someone near you is smoking, you don't have anywhere near the type of response you would if that person had a spider and was in your vicinity. You'd be like freaking out, right? So the only reason I use these numbers to illustrate this is I want you to write this down. Fear is a conditioned state of mind. Fear is a conditioned state of mind. It does not exist except for in our minds. Okay, so I'm bringing it back to this point. Fear does not exist except for in our minds. We create fear, right? We create that response. Okay, so I hope that's starting to kind of push that point that fear doesn't really exist, and especially in your creative practice. There is no need for fear in your creative practice. So now I want to explain how fear kills creativity. So that's the name of this hangout. So I want to, at least address this. So it comes back to the physiological responses, right? So when you're experiencing fear, there are a lot of things that happen. Your body begins to create noradrenaline, right? So this starts to course through your body. Your blood pressure increases, your heart rate rises, your pupils dilate. So it's a very strong physiological response, right? So your blood flows away from your head. It has a paralyzing effect on your body, and saliva decreases. So if you ever think of a moment where you were very nervous or afraid of something, you get that really dry mouth, right? I've had that before. I've gone to go on stage or something, like terribly dry throat. Another thing that happens is your bladder prepares to release everything that's in you so that you can flee very quickly. So if anyone has ever had this experience of being really nervous and having to go to the toilet, right? So this is the physiological response to fear. So these are also just signals. When you're ever experiencing these things now, you can identify them and say, okay, my heart rate's going up, my mouth's going very dry, I really need to go to the toilet. You can use that as identifiers to go, okay, I'm in a state of fear, physiological fear response. Okay, so within seconds of your amygdala receiving any sign of this, it sounds a general alarm, and your adrenal system just starts flooding your body with adrenaline. It diverts as much blood to your muscles, and it also it brings everything down to a decision about whether you need to flee or fight, right? So all other functions, all other cognitive functions get put on the back burner. So it is actually an impossibility. It is impossible to do high process creative work when you are in a fear state. It is impossible, because all your brain and your whole system, all it is geared towards doing is fight or flight type of response, right? So making sure that you are safe. So if you've ever had the experience I have as a singer and a performer of getting on stage, being terrified and not being able to remember any of my lyrics to my songs, if you've ever seen this in a performer, there's a good chance either they've got a bad memory or they're actually in a really high state of nervousness or fear. I've been there, I know, and now I can identify and go, oh, okay, that's what was going on there. But so this is why having an understanding of fear and how it affects your creative practice and how it kills fear, this allows you to start making much better decisions about how you approach your creative practice, and knowing that that it's important to deal with fear ahead of time, right? To prepare your mind and your mindset and the way that you perceive your creative work to be a very positive expression of who you are. It's a positive thing to do. If there are negative associations, if there's anxiety has been stated as something that will decrease creativity. So even in a workplace situation, if there's a overbearing boss and there's anxiety in that situation, the people working under that boss will be far less creative. Something that makes people more creative is a feeling of happiness. If you're upbeat, if you're elated, if you have positive associations, if you feel good about yourself. These are all conducive to positive creative work. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. One other example of that is Google, right? So Google, I think they're the second biggest company in the world, if my memory serves me right. If you look at the way that they run their operations and their offices, there's one thing that is strikingly similar to a kindergarten, right? So they have geared their entire business around how to release creativity, how to tap into people's creativity. And you'll see all the bright colors. They have a lot of freedom. They have free time to develop any part of a project that they enjoy. So this just totally unleashes creativity. And if you think about children, they don't have these concepts and fears and conditioning around creative work. So they are very free to just create, right? There's very little anxiety. All right. Coolness. Okay. So I hope this is helpful for you. If you've got any questions or anything, chuck them in the chat thing so I can address those. And yeah, all right, cool. So I'm gonna now step into the practical element of this Hangout, where I'm gonna get you to write a couple of things down and think about this and process it. So I want you to write down 5 to 10 fears, so current fears that are associated with your creative practice. So I reeled a whole list of them off before, but it might be a fear of not being good enough, a fear of success, a fear of failure, fear of how you might be judged. There are so many. I don't know, a fear that you're too old, a fear that you'll be perceived as someone that's too old to be doing whatever they're doing. Okay, so I hope you're doing that now. List 5 to 10 of those things. And now I want you to write down, what would I do if I did not have that fear? So what would the action be that if you didn't have that fear? Just say the fear was, I have a fear of what people think of me, how this is going to be perceived, or how people might judge me. What would you do if you did not have that fear? How would your behavior change? So if you were going to do a piece of work that was maybe slightly controversial or something, and you thought, I can't do this because other people are going to think of this, what would your action be if you didn't have that fear or that phobia? It would probably be to do that piece of controversial work, and maybe even be even more controversial. So that brings me on to the next question, which is quite similar. What would you do if you were a fearless artist? So if you had absolutely no fear, if you had no fear of failure, if you had no fear that success was going to hinder you, if you had no fear that you would be broke, if you just knew it was all going to work out and you were a totally fearless artist, what would your next project be? Use your imagination and get really excited about that concept of like, okay, what would I do if I was just totally fearless and I knew this was going to work out? What would I actually really do? What would I undertake? Okay. So the next part of it is whatever the fear is, and then if you think about the action you would take if you didn't have that fear, take that action in the next 24 hours. So begin something. Take some action towards that goal or that vision. Okay, cool. Hope that was helpful. I've got 3 more tips for you, and then I'm going to wrap this up. So I hope you're enjoying this so far. So tip number 1 of how to actually start dealing with fear. So like I mentioned earlier, fear is the future anticipation of pain. In human psychology, humans will do more to avoid pain than they will to enjoy pleasure, right? But one way to to move away from thinking about fear is to think about the pleasure you will gain from taking that action. So create in your mind the future anticipation of pleasure. So this will usurp your future anticipation of pain. So, so if your future anticipation of pain is getting on stage and being, maybe being heckled, that's a fear that you might have. Replace that with a fear of future pleasure. So you replace that with, I'm going to go on stage and people are actually really going to love what I have to share, right? So you replace that fear, you replace it with that, and you can even just imagine the type of energy and presence that comes out of having that running through your mind rather than a fear of pain. It will also change your physiology and your psychology like that. So that's a mechanism that you can use to help you. The other thing is about getting outside of your comfort zone. So that's very often where we will experience anxiety and fear. The idea with this is to step slightly outside of your comfort zone to begin with. So all you end up doing, if this is your comfort zone here and this is where you live, so you know what a comfort zone is, it's your habit patterns and daily actions that you take that you repeat. 90% of our days are actually virtually identical. So we very rarely come outside of our comfort zone. So the idea with dealing with fear is to come slightly outside of that comfort zone. So there are many ways of doing that, and you will know what your fears are and what an action you need to take. So come up with a small action you need to take daily to start moving outside of that comfort zone. So if you have a fear of what people might think of your work, just say you're a writer, pick someone that you trust and share your work with them and get their feedback. And you'll very often find that people's feedback is actually very positive. By and large, people will want to support your creative output. That's my belief. So the third thing is take small steps in exposing yourself to this fear. So this is the concept of exposure with fear. So the idea is someone that has maybe a fear of heights. So on the first day of overcoming a fear of heights, they get up onto a ladder and they go up maybe to the third rung and they stay there for 5 minutes, and the body starts to learn, the body and the mind starts to learn, I'm actually safe. Like I was saying before, that the amygdala is looking out to make you safe. So having that exposure, you start to get used to being on the third rung. Then the next day, maybe go up to the fourth rung, and maybe there's a bit of a rush and a bit of anxiety, and then stay there on the fourth rung for 5 minutes. So this is the concept of exposure. So if it's for a performer, maybe if you're terrified of performing in front of people, maybe you want to have an intimate concert at home. Maybe just for the people you live with, or 3 close friends, or you want to do an open mic night, right? Do a whole bunch of them until you're so comfortable with that and overcoming this fear of what people might think in that kind of setting. Okay, cool. So I'm going to reel off a couple more, and then I'm going to finish this up. I'm going to tell you a bit about the 2-day workshop and also a free workshop you can come to. Okay, so like I said, imagining a positive future. So this is the future anticipation of pleasure. Something else that can help is mindfulness and meditation, right? So in a moment where you're experiencing fear, take a moment, stop, be mindful of the sensations in your body. And this will allow you to create this gap where you can then start to insert more positive thoughts about the situation, which changes your physiology. One way of doing that is by expressing gratitude. So either verbally or write it down. So these are grateful thoughts of, things that you are grateful for. Maybe you're grateful for that opportunity to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, or maybe you're grateful for, your talents or whatever it might be. Something else that's really great as a happiness booster is exercise. So even a 20-minute walk, that changes your physiology. What I do every morning is I go for a 20-minute walk and I do affirmations, so positive affirmations, which puts my mind in a really kind of positive state. And when you're seeing the world through that lens, it's much easier to turn around fear whenever it pops up. Another thing is to dispute any negative thoughts. So if negative thoughts come up, be ready to rebut those negative thoughts with something positive. So that's an exercise we actually did on the first hangout when I talked about the inner critic. So this is really dealing with the inner critic of being able to know what your inner critic says and how to rebut it. Okay. The other thing is to go on a mass media diet. So get away from watching the news. It is a paranoia machine that instills fear in us. It reinforces this, and it's actually the way that it works is it actually feeds off our human, kind of obsession with fear. The amygdala constantly looking out for sensational kind of news items, right? So go on a total media ban, mass media ban. That stuff is bad for you. Wowza. All right, cool. So I know that I flew through a lot of that. That's a lot of information there. But, that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to just give you all these nuggets. But what I need to bring to your attention is what I just delivered to you there. It's the tip of the iceberg. Hopefully that's going to help you. That should help you already. But that is really a tip of the iceberg when it comes to dealing with your fear and insecurities around your creative practice. So the way that I really can go deep with you with this stuff, if this is interesting to you at all, and you want to overcome this stuff and just have a creative practice that just totally rocks instead of a creative practice that's full of fear and inner critic, messiness, then I invite you to come to the 2-day workshop that I'm running. There's information at the bottom of this page. You can there's a little panel that says Creativity Mindset Mastery, helps you sort out your inner critic, be more prolific, get a clear plan, get stuff done, take the tour. So I invite you, once this presentation is done, to take that tour. So it'll just basically take you through what the workshop does, how much it is, when it is, all of that stuff. And like I said, in that workshop, I go really deep with this stuff. We do a lot of practical exercises of smashing fear. So there are a couple of experiential processes of smashing fear that basically you can't do it in any other context. It has to be there live doing it. And I actually go through about 3 or 4 different processes because I just feel that this is so fundamental for anyone wanting to do really interesting, great work. Is you have to overcome fear. You have to overcome fear. And so this weekend workshop is an amazing way of doing that. So if you're watching this either live or you're watching it in the replay, all I can say to you is make sure that you watch tomorrow's hangout. Because at the end of tomorrow's hangout, I am going to present you with an offer that I think you would be ludicrous not to take me up on. So I'm going to give you an offer to basically join me at the workshop. And it's going to be a very super duper special deal only for people that have watched these hangouts. So if you know someone that you think this stuff could really help, so if you think you could use the help, you should definitely watch tomorrow's thing. But if you know someone else that could definitely use some help, tomorrow's topic is going to be creativity mindset mastery. So I'm really going to delve into the importance of having a really strong psychology around your creative practice that will unleash your creative potential. It's really exciting stuff. As you can tell, I get pretty animated when I talk about it because it's the thing that allowed me my creative freedom. And once I got a taste of that, I basically just wanted to share that with so many other people. So yes, make sure you do that. And if you know other people, please share this link with them. So this, you can grab it from the web page, like the title bar at the top, or you can hit share just above this video. And, you know, go and tag people and invite them into this treasure trove of information that's going to help a lot of creative people. So all exciting stuff. Thank you for watching. If you came to this page from anywhere but my newsletter, like getting an invitation from me, please sign up below this video where it says first name, email address, I'm in, keep me in the loop. And if you do that, I'll be able to send you the links for tomorrow and also the links to how to get involved in the 2-day workshop. So I think that's about it for now. Thanks for jumping on board. I had a ball. I hope some of that helped you. And stay in touch. Send me an email or chuck something in the chat box or whatever. But apart from that, otherwise, all I need to tell you is that your art matters. So go and create. Okay. See you later. Have an awesome evening. Bye.